boy. How's it going, guys? David here. No, I'm not going to be doing the entire review shirtless, as much as you would want me to do. But I don't want to risk my video getting taken down for graphic nudity. So I'm going to just keep my shirt on for now and continue on with my review of one of the most anticipated games of the year ever since it was announced back in E3 2016 that everybody was speculating was coming at some point, but it was still too good to be true. And even furthermore, when they said that it was going to be coming early 2018. And now, out of all days, releasing on 420, we have the revamp of God of War. Still a little bothered by the title. I just don't understand why they couldn't call it God of War 4 or God of War _. I mean, I know they kind of did that with Ascension and Ghost of Sparta, but it just makes things just a tad bit confusing. So I'm glad to see that so many community users on YouTube or Let's Players have titled this as either God of War 2018, God of War 4, or furthermore, God of War PS4. I dig that. So if you play video games just in general and have been a huge proponent of Sony's PlayStation console for the longest time, practically a little over a decade at this point, ever since the PS2, you are familiar with a little bald man. He's not really very little, but we are familiar with the character of Kratos and the things that he has done and the turmoil that he has undergone and how he was able to kind of take that turmoil, multiply it tenfold, and just kind of flip it over to the people that screwed him over through the entirety of the God of War franchise. Ever since with the first game back in 2005, spanning across 3 console games, one jumping over another generation over to the PS3 with God of War 3, and then in between having what I consider the prequel trilogy, God of War, Ghost of Sparta, Chains of Olympus, and then a console version of a prequel story in God of War Ascension. So it's kind of like God of War at this point is PlayStation's Star Wars. It really is, because you got the main trilogy, you got the prequel trilogy, and now you got The Force Awakens. God of War PS4. So there's no easy way to say this, but God of War PS4 here is kind of like a sign of the times where we're seeing an awful lot of revamps and reboots and remakes and also several different properties being brought back, whether it be in the form of a remaster like Crash Bandicoot and also the recent announcement of Spyro, or just other progressions in the franchise from past games that you thought, oh, would never come to be, like Shenmue, I think is another one where we're finally getting Shenmue 3, various other sequels, and now here we have another God of War game in the franchise. But similar to how The Force Awakens did with the Star Wars series, it's like taking the property, not exactly remaking it, even though there's people arguing that Force Awakens exactly did that, but with a fresh new coat of paint so that people who are never been in tune with the franchise and never really got into it, they can kind of get into it with a brand new game while at the same time paying respects to those who have followed the entire series for the past couple of years or for the past decade. And God of War PS4 strives to do that by taking on a brand new setting and a brand new tone, completely overhauling what you are generally used to with God of War. So it's really interesting that God of War PS4 takes a brand new approach to both the character and the setting and the way you kind of connect with a God of War game from a veteran God of War director, Cory Barlog, who helmed the second game. And I'm glad to see that Cory Barlog was able to kind of learn his experiences through the God of War 2 process and kind of apply it here to God of War, because you can tell from the way he talks about this game and the way he kind of looked at this game, he wanted another shot, but with a different take. Like, okay, the technology has progressed in a brand new direction and the likes that we have never seen before with the power of the PS4. What can we do this time around with a character like Kratos? And the most important word to take away from God of War PS4 is maturity. This game is a very mature step from the previous games, even though that's not to say that the other games weren't mature. I mean, they were rated M for a reason, but they did to a certain level have an exploitive tone with its setting being set in Greece, with the exotic kind of sexual outlook at that culture and the way that Kratos kind of maneuvers himself around that culture, because you're dealing with an awful lot of blood, an awful lot of violence, and an awful lot of TNA in those games. This game departs from that severely, where it's like, okay, that's not the focus. It's not just a classic beat 'em up game. it's going to be looking at the way Kratos embarks on this journey with his son and the way he interacts with his characters on a much more mature level that doesn't feel juvenile. That's not to say that there's nothing wrong with juvenile games. You have fun. You tone down your mind, and you're able to go, okay, I just want to kill things and tear things apart and whatever. And that's not to undermine the story in those 3 games, because it's a really cool and compelling look at vengeance through Kratos' eyes. It's just that everybody can anonymously agree that maybe Kratos was the most likable guy in those 3 games, because all he did was just yell, Ares,
Athena! Athena! Ares! 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 Athena! Thanatos! Deimos! Zeus! Athena! Gaia! Zeus! Ares! Athena! Gaia! Zeus! Poseidon! Pandora! Zeus!
Barlog and everybody else involved with this game knew that something needed to change, so I'm glad that that was step number 1. And step number 2 was changing the setting, because if you have not played, by some chance, those previous God of War games, you know that God of War 3 ended on an ambiguous note where you just don't exactly know where they can kind of go from this point, because there's no one doing what Kratos did. So I'm glad that they took what almost everybody was thinking, myself included, when God of War 3 ended and the credits rolled. I thought to myself, wouldn't it be dope that they tackled Norse mythology or Aztec mythology or just any other kind of mythology of gods and monsters and all that from some other culture? And that's precisely what they did here by taking Kratos, putting him in a Norse setting involving Thor, Odin, and all of the other different Nordic gods. And even though this setting can kind of make you feel a little small sometimes by how vast, but also very vibrant and somber and really, what's the word I'm looking for, monolithic, it really feels, especially with this giant ass mountain that you're attempting to climb, which is where your whole plot kind of centers on. It's also a very personal and intimate story for Kratos, as he embarks on this journey with his son to spread his wife's and Atreus' mother's ashes, because this is a person that really meant a great deal to them. But they're going to encounter so many obstacles along the way that it really shows you how much they're willing to go through these obstacles and never turn away by somebody just spreading some ashes. They could have settled for some other places, but there's something just really key to taking these ashes to this particular place. And obviously, not to go into spoilers, I'm not going to do that, but those obstacles become plot points from that point on. And certain things are learned about not only Atreus, who's a brand new character to us, but also even with Kratos, who we've already spent, I think, about at this point 6 games with. And here, there's a whole new dimension to him where he's much more complex, he's not as angry, he has his moments where maybe he's on the same kind of neutral ground where he's maybe plateauing with his emotions, especially by the denizens of times. He often calls Atreus boy.
No place for a boy. Come, boy. Now, boy. Come, boy. 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 Wait for me, boy. 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 Come, boy. Stay back, boy.
But over the 30 to 40 hour playthrough of this game, there's moments where you see a little bit of that vulnerability of Kratos I've never seen before, and I'm glad that this setting and this story arc for him, he's able to bring that out of him, because he needed, just like with the rest of the franchise, he needed to change, because he couldn't be that angry, always yelling, always just at 11 type of guy that he was in the previous game. So I'm glad they brought him down to a much more relatable level. And it's cool that, much like with the game, he's also matured from his past days.
The longer you wait to tell him his true nature, the more damage you do. He will resent you, and you may lose him forever.
There's much about me I would not have him know.
Kratos is not the only compelling character out of this ensemble of personalities that Barlog and the rest of the team were able to kind of put together to really have fun with the Norse mythology and see who can they take to either go against Kratos or help out Kratos. And the voice talent to help out these characters be fleshed out is also great, whether it be with some newcomers to the video game genre or even some very familiar voices that you're going to be able to find along the way. And they were able to really make these characters memorable and miss them when the game was to wrap up, whether it be Kratos himself or even Atreus, who's compelling in his own way. He can be a little annoying at times, but for every little moment that he's annoying, he's just as twice as either compelling or badass. And what's also very important about Atreus is that he's also a kid. And I think this is a very authentic portrayal of a kid. He's constantly asking questions, constantly curious about the environment around him and about the people around him, most notably his dad. And the questions that he asks, he's kind of annoying of how frequent he asks them, but the questions themselves are, they have, they have heft, they have ground. Like, I'm like, all right, yeah, I get why you're asking that, because this is knowledge that you're entitled to, so I get it. You just gotta slow your roll here or there, because he's authentically a kid, so he's authentically annoying in a natural way where you're like, okay, I don't wish to beat this kid up. Let's give him that best compliment, is that I don't wish for you to die. And little guy even has some moments of badassery where even I'm kind of surprised by the shit that he can do and how willing he's gonna go to do that stuff. I'm like, alright, you got cojones. But to me, personally, some of the other supporting characters also caught my eye, whether it be the witch that they encounter early on, or to my personal favorite, Mimir. Mimir is my absolute favorite character out of this entire game. I could not stop listening to his stories and being captivated by that voice actor. I don't know his name, but he really killed it as Mimir, because if they make another game in this new revamped version of God of War, I want him to be brought back in some capacity. All these brand new characters and Kratos' new motivation to undergo this story is brand new and moves and propels the game in a brand new direction, but that's not necessarily going to completely ignore the past lineage of the games, because there's certain moments and certain little things, whether it be visual or storytelling wise, that they do that are rather clever to pay homage and really respect those past games, to learn not only from the mistakes but also from the criticisms that people have put forward about those games, and take them and make that the advantage that this game has with its storytelling and with its visual cues, as well as even some of the gameplay that I'll tackle on later. But they do some really cool things that are going to have you in awe. And you could probably go on YouTube and check out other people's reactions about these things that they kind of reveal and go, oh my god, I can't believe they did that. But one thing needed to be made sure, putting this game on the PS4, it needs to look pretty. And by god, this is one of the best looking games I've had in a while. I mean, I think maybe this might give Naughty Dog a run for his money, whether it be with The Last of Us or with Uncharted 4, because they got some strong competition with what Santa Monica Studios was able to put out here with God of War. I mentioned that they put in a brand new setting that's wintry, and that has some big vistas with the mountains and the fog, and it's just able to really bring the sense of atmosphere that's very somber but ancient and dry, and you can actually feel it when you navigate through these forests or through the mountains or through the snow. And over the first few hours or so, I will admit I got a little bit of repetition going on with the environments, whether it be with the mountains or the woods, or you start to see the same tree. But before you can even finish the sentence of saying, okay, this is getting kind of repetitive, oh, new environment, whether it be inside of a mountain or inside of a temple or this brand new dimension or realm, where the game lets you know that maybe if you have not purchased a brand new 4K TV with HDR, you should probably get on that real quick. Not pimping Sony out or anything like that, but it makes me eager to set up my brand new TV and maybe jump back into this game with the brand new fidelity. Of course, with that will come with brand new PlayStation 4 Pro. But there's so many HDR moments that make really good use of the vibrant color or the setting or light or anything that has to do with particle effects. And I'm glad that they took full advantage of it, especially since it's not just visual, eye candy for the sake of that. It caters to the story and it caters to the mythology that they were kind of able to incorporate with the story, whether it be you exploring the settings or with the cutscenes, which are actually all seamlessly integrated into one 30 to 40 hour tracking shot. That was one of the captivating things that Barlog made clear during the marketing, is that this game takes place in one quote-unquote tracking shot. And sure, it's a video game, it's animated, it's made on the computer, so stitching all this together, it's no problem. But you still have to put into account the choreography to get all these actors, especially when it came to those cutscenes and they had to act versus each other, how to put them in the right blocking and the right setting and give the right amount of movement and performance so that it all still looks like it's being done in one take. and it's never cutting at any point. It does a good job at demonstrating how great these performances are, and also it's able to kind of bring you into the immersion of the game, whether it be with its storytelling or with its environment. And that's why I never usually do this, but I would tell you to give immersive mode a shot. This game has an immersive mode which gets rid of the majority of the heads-up display that you get during gameplay. And when you are playing during the game and you don't have any of that HUD and it jumps into a cutscene, it is smooth as fuck. It really is. This game also sounds good. The sound effects that also give a broad sense of atmosphere, whether it be with the steps amongst wood or snow or some cracklings in the background. And I already mentioned the voice acting is top notch, but also the score is amazing. And I'm glad to see that Bear McCreary was the one doing it. He is a staple for the music behind The Walking Dead and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and a couple of other movies, and I'm glad that he's kind of stretching his muscles with a very orchestral soundtrack that sounds like a fusion between what you typically expect out of a God of War game, while at the same time putting in some Norse influence type of sounds into it. My only complaint is that the main theme you kind of hear reoccurring throughout the score sounds a little Halo-ish. Like, when I first started playing the game, I thought Halo was coming on, and I'm like, ooh, you just changed a couple notes. I really hope you don't get yourself a little lawsuit under your hands, McCreary, but I'm glad to see that you delivered a very memorable score. Now, if you have played all the God of War games at this point, you were probably in the same exact mindset as everybody else when the game was first unveiled back in E3 2016. The gameplay. Ooh, that is way different than what you're usually expected out of a God of War game. Because if you have played those games, you know that it's a hack and slash where you have a fixed camera, you maneuver Kratos from one portion of the environment to another as you hack and slash your way through enemies with the Blades of Chaos, and you gather orbs so you can power up your abilities, you gather health, magic, etc, etc. This kind of overhauls that completely, while at the same time sticking with some familiar formulas that you have seen in some of the most recent games to be on the PS4, with a camera placed firmly over the shoulder of Kratos, and he has a slightly slower movement that kind of applies to his attributes because he's an older guy, so he's going to move a little slower, and he's now using an axe, a Nordic axe to be specific. And they took all of the attacks and mapped them on the shoulder buttons, and then all of your face buttons now become what I like to call strategy buttons. And strategy buttons are the ones that you use in tangent with the heavy attacks and the light attacks, because strategy is the main emphasis of the gameplay, rather than just the hack and slash beat 'em up mentality you had in those previous games. Here you actually kind of have to strategize how you play the game versus your enemies, and how you also use Atreus within the gameplay, because Atreus is going to be able to help you out. And one of the buttons lets you control Atreus with his arrows or with whatever kind of summoning moves he might have during the field of battle, while at the same time maneuvering the axe to the best of your ability. And of course, as you progress the game, you gain new abilities with the axe, new attributes, and you're able to use all of this versus different type of enemies. You start off with basic drawer, which are your usual enemy fodder, but over time those enemies are going to become much more challenging, whether it be the main ones you have to get out of your way as you progress the story, or whether it be with some optional bosses that you tackle later on your own accord. And some of these optional bosses, they're optional for a reason, because they are rather bad. And by bad, I mean like they're tough to go up against. I know some people are probably tired of hearing this term at this point, but they're a little Dark Souls-esque, where you encounter them and they hit you with one hit, and that's it. You're dead. Unless you got some kind of resurrection stone, that's it for you, and you have to start from the very beginning. But they never feel cheap. They, at least to my extent, they never felt unbeatable, because a couple of times that happened at first early on in the game, progressed through the story, and then I came back and whooped their ass, because there is a progression system in this game that I thoroughly respect. But before I move on to that progression system, let it be clear that the enemies you go up against in this game range from the scattered ones, where you go from room to room, that is kind of reminiscent of the classic God of War games, but what's also classic of God of War that has to be brought forward here, even from a veteran director like Barlog, has to be the boss battles. And this game has terrific boss battles. I will admit there's a couple that are better than others. In fact, I'll make the argument that maybe the game blows its load just a little early with the boulder fight, or at least the stranger fight as it's called, because this fight is what... It's almost like if you wanted to play the video game version of that Man of Steel fight at the end between Superman and Zod. This is kind of like that, only with a few less casualties. But at the same time, it still has that feeling of empowerment where you're just like, holy shit, this feels awesome. We're blowing through trees. You feel like two actual really powerful beings going at each other, and it's really awesome to see this kind of unfold, even with within its destructible environment. And there's a couple more boss battles throughout the game that, like I said, some are kind of like, okay, you know, I figured out the pattern, I figured out how to kill this one enemy. And there's a couple of others where it may not be on the most challenging side, but on the sense of scale and scope, I just can't just turn away and not go like, oh my god, this is actually happening. Kratos is actually doing that. That you're like, I want to do that again. But it's time to move forward, because this game is rather large and heavy, because you have to go out there and gather some loot and upgrade yourself. Besides learning some new combo moves and new abilities for your axe or for Atreus' bow, you're also able to rank up and gather more materials for either your armor or your weapons, or even those little gems that you put inside your armor and your weapons, so that you can upgrade them up so that you become stronger, you become much more potent, you're able to defend yourself more, or you're able to do more stuff with your axe, or you have more magic, or yada yada yada. On top of the things that you can kind of scavenge around the land, whether it be new materials, more money, so you can buy stuff from your local smith, your local shop, by these two dwarves that have their own little shop throughout the realm, which is really a really great, funny running joke that they have going on with those two. But even they sometimes offer brand new things that you can acquire, and the RPG system in this game is rather deep, where I'm 10 hours in and I'm still being introduced to some brand new mechanics. I'm giving a little tutorial, a little paragraph about what they're about. And I will admit, at times it's a little daunting. At times I found myself ignoring certain things that the game was making available to me, but it was also kind of scaring me at the same time, because I'm like, okay, I can change the little handle on my axe to make it much more powerful, and that handle has a little socket inside that I could put a gem in it to upgrade it even more. Layers upon layers upon layers. So people who are huge RPG nuts are going to have a ball with what vastness they put into the RPG mechanics for this game, which is really surprising for a God of War game. But to me, I did find myself being just a little overwhelmed by how big this system really was, that I just didn't really bother with it too much. The same could be said with this map, which crosses not only through the normal realm, but also with other realms that I'm not going to really spoil for you, because part of the mystery or part of the fun is discovering how their environments look, or what they're called, or where exactly you go to and for what reason. But the map is able to extend amongst different planes. So some of those planes are a little bit on the small side, but the bigger one would be Midgard, which aka Earth. And it's here where you got some side quests called favors for either different characters or some people that you interact with on the go, or some of these shopkeepers. And you also got labors, which are some of the more numeric things, like, oh, kill 100 of these little holographic looking ravens, or you gather these certain materials, or you go out there and do these treasure hunts, yada yada yada. And it all amounts to an abundance of things that you can do in this world that feel rewarding. They really reward you with some decent loot, whether it be with monetary in-game currency, or in this game called hack silver, or even with some really cool gems or really cool armor that you can then use later on to progress in the game and make it a little bit easier, and will help you go back and beat those bosses that were giving you a hard time earlier. And this helps make the game not only, again, between 35 to 40 hours, but also makes a really good point to revisit the game long after you beat the main story, because there's just so much to do. And you can make also an argument that this could be also kind of overwhelming for some people, because it does have that RPG approach, But I found this to be a little bit more digestible than the RPG mechanics. The RPG was just a little too deep for me, where I'm like, okay, just give me a good, strong, powerful move for my axe and a really good handle on it and a really good set of armor, and I'm done. I don't have to balance out the speed with the defense, with the runic attack and the vitality and all that. It's cool that they give you some proper explanations for what they all mean, so at least I didn't feel like it was too smart for me or they were just neglecting me, but I just make the choice to just go on a much more simpler approach. But you always have the options to tackle the gameplay how you please, whether it be the way you upgrade or even the way you encounter these enemies with the different strategies that you get to use your axe with. And the funny thing is that with all of these different things kind of put together that you might recognize from other different games, I can see the argument for what people call skin swapping, which is basically another game with a different layer of paint on it. And the comparisons have been made to The Last of Us or Uncharted, where we have Kratos' skin kind of covering the main character you get to control, that is interpreted differently in other games, whether it be with Joel or Nathan in those other two games that I mentioned. And then you have that secondary character who is either helping you out with the fighting or the gameplay, but also with the different world building and environment exploring, especially when this game starts to bring some other elements from the previous games, whether it be with you tackling puzzles and solving these puzzles, but also wall jumping and scaling and wall crawling and being able to maneuver around the environment that you've kind of seen not only with God of War but also with Uncharted, because it's also being done in that similar motion or using the same kind of level of physics, where Kratos is even kind of maneuvering himself across a wall the same way that maybe Nathan Drake would. And I can see that. And I will admit, it did affect me somewhat early on in the game, but over time, I was able to kind of adjust myself to how Kratos encountered with this environment, how he had dialogue options with his kid, and how he was able to look up different lore of the Nordic gods and kind of have these conversations with Atreus, that over time they were able to suck me in with this and made me identify more with God of War's interpretation of Nordic mythology differently than a character like Joel would in his universe or Nathan would do in the Uncharted series. And thanks to that, I was able to connect with this journey and this exodus that Kratos and Atreus try to undertake on a much more personal, emotional, and also physical level. Because I'm right there with them fighting off all these different enemies just to get to this fucking mountain. And it really does feel exhausting, but I mean that in the best way possible. And once the journey ends, at the point that it does, it actually made me go, wow, it's over. I actually kind of wish that it would have kept going. And it kind of does, especially if you do have some side quests racked up on your little log during the pause menu. But I'm still that's not gonna take away from me missing these characters interacting with each other or with various other supporting characters, especially Mimir, and I'm gonna miss them. I'm gonna miss them long after having played this game, even with the amount of time that I put into it. Along with pulling that damn axe. Pulling the axe out of wherever direction you threw it in is just so satisfying. So minor qualms aside, it's not exactly a masterpiece, but it's definitely going to be one of the best games of the year for me. And I'm going to be giving God of War 2018 PS4, whatever it is you decide to call it, a solid and firm, a rock stonemason firm 9 out of 10. So with all of these different movies and games coming out, were you guys able to pocket enough money and play God of War? Please post all of your guys' comments and insights and experiences of playing the brand new game in the comment section below. What was your favorite moment? No spoilers though, this is the spoiler-free territory, so keep it really clean. And also let me know, what are your guys' theories going into the next kind of interpretation of God of War? Barlog himself said that he wants 5 games out in a very quick pace. Should they tackle something brand new just like this game did with the previous games, or should they continue with the Norse mythology, especially considering a little Easter egg towards the end of the game that has me rather stoked, especially considering other properties out there kind of using this similar material that has people kind of geeked out, and it's like, you know what? That's a very smart business move, so I'm pulling for them for that. Please let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Make sure you hit the like and share button down below to support the video, and of course subscribe for more reviews and videos coming very soon. Until next time, guys, I will see you all later. Some person just made off with somebody's purse and you gotta go catch them, and it's a little bit time sensitive, but at least it gets the urgent feeling of being a superhero where you have to go take care of this random crime because random crime happens, and they put it here in this game. And then some fucking kid loses his balloon.
Be good now.
What do we say?
I'll never let my balloony go again.
You were supposed to say thank you, you little shit. God damn it. He just abandoned his child.